Chapter 3: The Secret Beneath the Shadows. They hid in an abandoned watchtower deep in the Whispering Woods. The tower had once been used by forest guardians, but it had been empty for decades. Moss covered the stones. Vines had grown through the windows. A family of tiny winged mice lived in the roof. Rowan hated the mice. The mice did not seem to care. "We need to understand what you can do," Nessa said. Ilara sat on the floor. "I can control shadows. That much we know. I can move through them. That is considerably more concerning. I can feel things through them." Rowan frowned. "Like what?" Ilara looked toward the darkness beneath the table. "Everything." She closed her eyes. The shadow stretched. Suddenly, she could feel the forest around the tower. The trees. The rocks. The roots. The creatures. Then she felt something else. A presence. Far away. Watching. Ilara opened her eyes. "What is it?" "I don't know." Nessa sat beside her. "Try again." Ilara hesitated. She reached into the darkness. This time, she felt a memory. Not hers. A child running through a forest. Black wings. A woman shouting. A burning village. Ilara gasped and pulled away. "What did you see?" Ilara shook her head. "I don't know." But she did. She had seen something connected to herself. Something old. Something buried. That night, they began training. They created exercises. The first was called shadow calling. Ilara had to pull a small strand of darkness from beneath a chair and move it across the floor. At first, the shadow lashed out wildly. It wrapped around Rowan's ankle and dragged him across the room. Rowan screamed. Nessa laughed. Ilara apologized. The second exercise was shadow sight. Ilara had to close her eyes and locate objects, using only their shadows. At first, she could sense only vague shapes. Then she learned to focus. A cup. A chair. A stone. A mouse. Eventually, she could sense the entire room without opening her eyes. The third exercise was shadow step. Ilara had to move from one patch of darkness to another. The first time, she appeared inside a bush. The second time, she landed in the river. The third time, she appeared upside down in a tree. Rowan applauded. "Your technique is improving." Ilara glared at him. The fourth exercise was more dangerous. Shadow veil. Ilara had to hide herself inside darkness. Not to become invisible. Something more powerful. She had to make others forget she was there. The first time she tried it, Rowan walked directly past her. Then he stopped. "Wait." Ilara held her breath. Rowan looked around. "Why do I feel like I forgot something?" Nessa looked at Ilara. "You." Ilara released the spell. The darkness vanished. Rowan stared at her. "That is terrifying." Ilara looked at her hands. "I know." But there were other powers. Powers Ilara discovered by accident. She could shape shadows into weapons. A sword. A shield. A bow. She could create tendrils of darkness that moved like living creatures. She could hide objects inside shadows. She could listen through darkness. She could even enter dreams. That discovery happened when Rowan fell asleep beside the fire. Ilara reached toward his shadow. Suddenly, the world changed. She stood inside a dream. Rowan was riding a giant bird through the clouds. He was wearing a golden crown. Ilara stared at him. "Really?" Dream Rowan pointed at her. "Silence, I am the king of the sky." Ilara immediately pulled herself out. When Rowan woke up, she told him nothing. The most frightening power, however, was the one she could not control. When Ilara became angry, the shadows reacted. When she became afraid, they defended her. And when she felt grief, they whispered. Sometimes they whispered words. Sometimes names. Sometimes memories. One evening, Elara sat alone outside the tower. The moon hung above the trees. She looked down at her shadow. Who am I? The shadow moved. Elara froze. A voice answered. You know. She stood. Who are you? The shadow stretched across the ground. Your blood remembers. Elara's heart pounded. What does that mean? The darkness formed a shape. A woman. Tall. Black-winged. Silver-eyed. The image looked exactly like Elara. Then the shadow spoke again. You are not the last. Elara stepped closer. Who else is alive? The figure turned toward the deepest part of the forest. The ones who survived. Then the vision disappeared. Elara stood alone. Behind her, Rowan's voice called. Elara. She turned. Rowan stood in the doorway. He had heard her. Who were you talking to? Elara hesitated. Then she looked toward the forest. I think someone is calling me. Who? Elara's silver eyes reflected the moonlight. I don't know. A horn sounded in the distance. Once. Twice. Then a third time. Nessa ran outside. Royal patrols. Rowan looked toward the kingdom. How did they find us? Elara felt the answer before she heard it. The darkness beneath the trees trembled. Someone was approaching. Not the guards. Something else. A figure stepped between the trees. Black wings. Silver eyes. A face that looked almost exactly like Elara's. Elara could barely breathe. The stranger smiled. Finally, she said. Elara raised her hand. The shadows gathered around her. Who are you? The stranger looked past her toward the distant kingdom. Your sister. Behind her, more shadows began to move. One. Then two. Then dozens. Elara stared into the darkness. The shadow fae had not vanished. They had been hiding. Waiting. And now they had found her. The stranger extended her hand. You have much to learn. Elara glanced back toward the glowing towers of Luminara. The royal guards would soon arrive. If they found her, she would be imprisoned. If she followed the stranger, she might discover the truth about her family. But there was one problem. Elara had spent her entire life pretending to be an ordinary fae. Now the kingdom knew what she was. She had no idea whom to trust. Not even the people who claimed to be her family. The stranger's smile faded. Choose quickly. From the forest behind Elara came the sound of approaching footsteps. The royal guards had arrived. Elara looked at Rowan. Then Nessa. Then there was a shadowy figure waiting in the woods. For the first time in her life, Elara did not feel powerless. She felt something else. Something dangerous. Something ancient. The shadows gathered at her feet. And they waited for her command.